Hello, Spark fans, and welcome back to Advancing Spark, where it is time for a long overdue news show. So, there've been a load of Databricks updates. We didn't do a December update, and it's now in February. So, we're going to do a little recap for everything that's happened in the Databricks platform across December 2023 and January 2024. And there are quite a few things in there. So, we're going to be looking at things like AI being turned on by default, new ways of serving out things like AI and online tables and some serverless style serving things, a load of UI enhancements, some buttons that should have come a long time ago and now they're, which is great, and things like XML support, which I know some people really wanted and some people are really happy, but stop using XML, but I also know you can't, it's fine. You can now use this until you get rid of XML, which we should all do as a society. But it's fine. So that's the plan. We're going to have a look through the release notes, walk through it, talk about what each of these different things means, have a look at a few things like the enterprise relationship diagram, which I'm so happy about because I'm a big data nerd and ERDs make me happy. And yeah, that's the plan. So as always, if it's your first time around it, don't forget to like and subscribe. And yeah, we're just going to dive straight into it and see what the release notes look like. So, as always, I'm on the Azure flavor of the release notes. Do check out the release notes for your cloud provider where you've got Databricks. And yeah, we're going to go and whip through and have a look. We're going to start off with the December release notes and then kind of go from there. So actually, let's just dive in, platform release notes, start with December right down to the bottom, and we'll work our way up. Cool. Okay, so a few things. Global init scripts that kind of made legacy a while ago. It's now end of life. Stop using them. That's fairly clear. Init scripts and DBFS, end of life. Stop using them. That's fine. Admin used to be you go to the SQL admin side, you go to the data engineering side. They've combined that. That's nice and straightforward. Okay. New thing: foundational model APIs. So these are essentially hosted versions of pre-trained generative AI models generally, that you can then dig into and use just like a web server. So a bit like in Azure, you've got cognitive services, you've got the ChatGPT endpoints, that kind of thing. This is a similar thing just inside of Databricks. So you can do things like, query large language models, do encoding, that kind of stuff. There's a bunch of these things in there that are hosted. So you can use like Llama to do chat, Mixtral to do chat. You've got some completion ones, you've got an embedding one. So if you are trying to use certain kind of, pay-per-click style, pay-per-token style things, there are now a bunch of APIs built into Databricks that you can use that will do that. Two different types. One charges you per click, pay-per-token versions. One allow you to have provision throughput. You pay in advance and say, I want to keep these going. Main thing to know is there's limited regional support for now. So the pay-per-clicks, I think, are all in the US, whereas provision throughput you can get in West Europe. So if you're looking at down this lines, do have a look about your region that you're in, and that'll see what you can do. But yeah, essentially, you want to go and use an LLM and you want to call a web service. There's now versions of that baked into Databricks rather than you need to set up other subscriptions, other things inside Azure, all of that kind of stuff. Again, feature and function serving is now available. So we saw you had real-time inference as a thing in terms of model serving. We've now got the ability as part of the serverless compute to do feature table lookups, so kind of like the online tables, and call functions and that kind of stuff using serverless. So if you're trying to build something that's you're trying to build into a RAG, a retrieval augmented generation thing, in that you're trying to put some embeddings into a large language model prompt to make it more accurate, you can now plug together some of these things. Essentially, they're providing the building blocks to allow you to build out Gen AI applications purely within Databricks. Now, this is all a big change to people who've been using Databricks for a long time, because previously Databricks it's always based on Spark. It's always like a big parallel model. So the idea of putting something that's meant to be snappy and fast and web service based, it's like, no, but that's not Databricks. Databricks is a parallel system. It's for bulk things. Not anymore. So a lot of these new things based on serverless, based on these kind of quick online real-time things, just more and more additional use cases on the AI side of things where you can be using Databricks for it just directly, which is great. Okay. Any scripts can reference workspace files, just super useful if you're building out some more increased things. New JDBC driver, and there's an ODBC driver, and we'll see some other bits and pieces in there. Git integrations now actually works properly, which is good. Databricks online tables we mentioned. So that's online tables are essentially, if you're trying to do a lookup table, you want to be able to kind of quickly reference something using it as a feature table. The way that we store data normally in the, like all lake kind of scenarios is column store, and it's compressed column store because that is good for analytical use cases. If you're trying to do like a very selective query and say, no, just give me this record, I just want that one record, I'm going to do a single record select. Column store isn't always the fastest because you need to read big chunky column store segments and then work out where you are. Online tables is essentially saying, I've got a delta table. Oh, actually, could you make a row store version of that just for doing really quick lookups against, for if I'm doing kind of that real-time serving kind of stuff. So you pay a bit of serverless compute for it. You pay a bit of Microsoft, someone can you go manage that as a hosted thing, but you don't need to look after it yourself. So online tables, super useful. Again, that same story about doing the real-time lookup, the real-time feature serving, plugging it into an online inference model. Lots of really interesting stuff in there. Okay, having external models, so you can actually sort of poke out to other models, such as Azure OpenAI, by just serving that through your model serving. So you can have something in model serving, which is kind of doing a bit of a decision and sometimes going off to talk to a hosted version of a model, bringing it back, basically treating it as the same as if it was any model that you've built yourself. So if you have Unity Catalog sitting there, you've got a load of models that you've actually saved in there, well, you can actually save models in there that look and feel like models that are part of the rest of your model catalog, but some of them are actually pointers to externally hosted models. So super useful, really interesting. Again, it's all been a very AI story so far. There's just nice little things. Notebook editor themes. If I'm in a notebook, if I just go and grab any old thing, have I got some random code? A functions test. Okay, it's just a random bit of code. I can now go and say, hey, actually, can I have light mode of dark mode? That's been in there for a little while. But I can now say, how do I want the syntax highlighting to work? I want it to have just different colors, my different keywords, which is one of those reasons, and it's a little thing that makes a big difference to a lot of people, you know, basically doing development. Why people are so keen to go, no, but I want it like VS Code, or I want it in PyCharm, I need my IDE, because then I can set my colors. And actually just making Databricks itself a little bit of a better development environment is a good thing all around. So you now have notebook editor themes, which is nice. There's a new cell results table, which is just a little better, a little bit faster, actually sort of works a hell of a lot better selecting and copying and pasting things out of it. So if you're constantly getting results and then go and try to copy things and like, oh, that doesn't work, I'll have to save it as a CSV so I can copy and paste it, put it somewhere else. You don't need to do that anymore. There's now the new results table, which is just generally better. If you're uploading files into Unity Catalog saying, just upload this thing, you can now load up to 5 gig, which is fairly chunky, so you can work with that directly. And then, oh, my favorite thing. There's a weird thing when we switched to using lake houses. When we were building lakes, it was always whatever the contents of your data frame would determine the structure of the data that got landed down to disk, largely because it was schema on read. So people got used to the idea that I don't start off with a data model, deploy my data model, and then feed data into it, as we did in the relational world. No, we just have a data model where we put the logic in, and then what gets created is what we call our data model. And slowly, as lakehouses have matured and governance has come in, and actually, oh no, actually, it is useful to be able to publish a data model. Oh, actually, there's things like foreign keys and primary keys are really useful for people to actually use. Slowly, we've seen that maturity creep back in. So in Unity Catalog now, we can go to our catalog. We can go to a table. Now, these tables have to have primary or foreign keys defined. So you won't see this button unless you've actually done that legwork already. So I've got a table here. I've got a primary key defined. I've got foreign keys defined in it. I've got a load of little dims that have got a primary key defined in it. So if you have done the legwork and when you created those tables, you went ahead and did all of these things, you'll see this magical little button up here of view relationships. And I've now got an ERD. I can now see actually my fact table. Oh, this is how it joins to all my dimensions. Shockingly enough, on the surrogate keys that I've made up. Now, this is just a scrappy model I just created earlier, just to show you this. But yeah, no, just ERDs. Useful, nice. As long as you are creating primary keys and foreign keys on your table, as long as you're actually doing the legwork of creating those objects in your table definitions. So 2 ways you can do that. Do I have the thing I made earlier where I actually did that? I don't know if I do. Yeah, it was in my untitled notebook, obviously. Terrible. So to do that, I have to create these tables. So my fact table, just again, a blank created table with this is a primary key. This is a foreign key, it references that table. This is a foreign key, it references that table. Create all my dimensions, go, well, this is the primary key of this dimension. So when you are creating those tables inside Unity Catalog, you need to be creating it with those primary and foreign keys, or you need to be running an alter table statement and say, well, actually change that, make that a primary key. Change that, make that a foreign key. If you have done that, then you can now use that entity relationship diagram. You've got documentation. You can share that documentation. Very different to lineage. It looks the same. They've used the same UI as they do in the Unity Catalog lineage, but this is created by the table definitions. It's not like you have to have run a query to join them for it to go, oh, well, those two are related. This is setting this up. Other big thing to note, this is Unity Catalog only. So that information about the primary key and the foreign key, that doesn't live in the Delta table. That is not in your metadata. Other things can't see that unless they go through Unity. That is where the data is stored. But still, if you're using Unity Catalog, great. Super, super useful. We've got some new things that we can do in Delta sharing. You can now share volumes. So if you've mounted external storage with a load of unstructured data in there, you can now share that as a data sharing location. Again, just interesting, expanding the remit of Delta sharing. Same with dynamic views that have row-level security on there and dynamic data masking. So if you've created a function that is doing that, well, if the person's in this group, then allow them to see these rows. If they're in this group, allow them to see these rows. That now works in Delta sharing. So actually, even though it's December, I'd kind of assumed I didn't need to do one for December because, you know, it's December. No one does any work in December. Turns out the guys are actually fairly busy and there's lots of stuff going on. But there is more. So, January. January, loads of stuff. One, AI is now turned on by default. So previously, if you wanted things like the Databricks assistant to work, if you wanted to be going, oh, there's an error, do you want me to just fix the error for you because you're an idiot and you left off a bracket? That stuff, you had to turn it on at the account level in the account console. So again, you needed admin access to your Databricks account console, which you didn't have previously. Yeah, slightly painful. Now it's enabled by default. So you need to be a little careful. If you have a company policy saying you're not allowed to use AI, you need to make sure you've disabled that at the account level because now it will get turned on by default for anyone setting things up. There's a new ODBC driver baking in a few different things into there, essentially just making it a little bit, fixing some bugs and kind of sorting out some new features. They're removing the legacy Git integration. So in the old days, back when I wasn't so grey, if you wanted to use any kind of source control, I'd have to go to each and every individual notebook and go, add this one to source control, attach it to Git. Now commit those changes on a notebook by notebook basis. And then they brought in Databricks repos. And so no one's used that Databricks, like the notebook level Git integration for ages. So they're turning off, which makes entire sense. If you are still using the notebook level one, you've not used repos yet, well, that's kind of on you. Switch to repos. Repos is so much better. You do proper feature branching. It makes so much more sense. So the old style of doing it is going away. You're going to be forced to move to Databricks repos. Please go ahead and do it. Yeah, you can now have bigger files in your workspace. Don't know why you necessarily would, because you can put it in a volume now with that much higher limit, but up to you. We're now getting new system tables. There's two new system tables we can see. So one of them is this warehouse activity. So if you've got a SQL warehouse and it's starting, it's stopping, and people scaling it out, scaling it down, you'll now actually get those as system events. If you haven't seen system tables, they're like the admin tables, the event tables that we can query. You need to set up to scrape that data and land it locally. But you can be saying, well, this user accessed that table, this amount of notebook has been ran, this cluster's been turned on and cost us money, and now this warehouse has scaled up, scaled down, all that stuff is now available as a system table. Super, super useful. Another fun little UI one, widgets. Databricks widgets is essentially our way of parameterizing a notebook. It's a way of having some little drop downs at the top of a notebook saying, well, type a string in here, pick something from a drop down, pick something from a drop down. And to create them, to attach some widgets to a notebook, inside my notebook, I had to write some code creating the widgets. And I've taught so many people how to work with widgets, and they always just look at me. in so much confusion that inside my code, I define some stuff that adds parameters at the start of my code that can be seen later in my code. And it's just this weird circular, I'm writing code to define the things that my code uses. It kind of makes sense. Now, actually, it's going to be a lot easier to teach people stuff because we can just create widgets now from the UI. So we're going to go in edit, add widget, and it says, what do you want your widget to be? Well, okay, yes. Some nice default stuff. Go ahead, create me a default parameter, and I've now got a widget. Previously, to do that, I would have had to have done my dbutils.widgets.text, call it param1. You know, I'd have had to define that in my code and run that cell before my widget first appears. I'd have had to have a cluster turned on to be able to run the cell that adds a widget to the thing. It's just, yeah, just a small change, but actually should make it a lot easier for people to get started using things and just make a lot more sense to people. That's cool. Okay. A knock-on effect of Delta sharing now supporting volumes is Databricks Marketplace now supports volumes. So if you were using Databricks Marketplace and they were sharing some Delta tables and you're like, couldn't you just like share the original files in their original state just because there's some other stuff I want to do because they had some weird, I don't know, esoteric file type you're trying to use. If you're trying to use geospatial shapes and you wanted the original shape file, well, now actually someone could make a Databricks Marketplace thing saying, here's all the original shape files. I don't actually need to give you it in a, like, fudged into a tabular format. So, super useful. Loads and loads of use cases so we can start seeing things like that. We can now share AI models via Delta sharing. So, Delta sharing, you can now just register an ML model and then go, oh yeah, you can access my ML model. It's in my feature store. It's in, well, not my feature store. It's in my Unity catalog. It's one of my model serving things. It's registered. You can actually now come and access that. So again, just increasing the ability of what we can do with that. There's new Databricks runtime, which I don't think we'll have time to go into today, but there's things in there, mainly to do with some of these bits that are coming out. There's two things. One, there's a quick fix. You can now actually, if things are broken, you can click fix and it'll suggest a change to your data. For example, if I'm going in here and that's not really working properly, I can click up here. And I can go, can you fix that for me? And I actually just go and ask it how to fix it. They're like, what are you doing? Your thing doesn't make any sense. Missing imports from dbutils. Oh, no, that's not right. So it's got the fix wrong. But there's some changes that have come in here to allow you to do that better. I mean, that's more around the errors. It'll flag errors better for you. It'll tell you if your code you've written is garbage better than it used to. Again, it's a better IDE than it used to be just directly in the browser. There is a new UI. So you might have seen that. I've turned my new UI on. So this whole cell looks a little bit different than it used to. The Databricks Assistant things, all that kind of stuff. This is the new UI. And I told it not to remind me. So I don't know if I can turn off the go back to the old UI so you see what it used to look like. Either way, you can now switch on a slightly different notebook experience. So you'll just see a slightly different UI when you're working in a notebook, but just getting a little bit better. I mentioned that there was another system table. You've now got this market listing system table. So if you have published some stuff onto the Databricks Marketplace and you want to know what people are doing on it, you want to be able to have that as part of your dashboards going, well, what are we doing? What are people doing with the stuff on the marketplace that we published? You've now got that as a system table. So if you're using Databricks Marketplace to publish data out to people, you should be looking at that and then basically being able to manage your activity. You work out what are your popular data sets, what are your unpopular ones, how often are people refreshing it. All of that information you can now start pulling out, which is great. Access control lists, you can now do better. So you can go in and turn all the standard things on. Don't let people see clusters if they don't have access to them. Don't let people see jobs if they don't have access to them. All the general access control stuff, generally just, it's now all turned on by default. You had to previously go to the UI and say, yes, please have good access control. Now just turned on by default for premium. Makes sense. They've changed some of the URI paths in Unity Catalog external volume, so you can now actually just use the full cloud storage path to point to things rather than just kind of having to use a volume path. Again, you can use either, and it just some options about how it works. A weird one. So certainly in the Azure side of Databricks, you've now got the choice of, do you use a service principal that you've created and managed through Entra ID, Active Directory, or do you use it using a Databricks managed service principal? Essentially, Databricks can go and create service principals on your behalf now. So if you want something that is Databricks going to access things, and it's only Databricks going to access stuff that you're going to use that service principal for, you can now create a Databricks managed service principal directly through Databricks and not needing access to go and do it through Microsoft Entra. So slightly different in terms of how we think about it. If you needed to, like, if you're doing DevOps and you needed something that can connect to Databricks and into other things and have access to other stuff, that's not going to work through the Databricks managed service principal. You need to set it up through Entra ID as usual. But just another option for doing security when you're doing things internally to Databricks and you want it to run as a service principal, you've now got that concept directly inside of Databricks. Monitoring's gotten better for the GPU serving workloads, so you can actually see how it's using. You've got some better tables for going and seeing how those models are actually working, which is good. I've not really had to dig into it yet. Jobs are easier. So previously, if you created a new Databricks job, you'd have to at least set some tasks up and then save it and then go to that job to be able to edit any of the job level settings. Now, as soon as you click create, you get kind of a dummy shell job and you can start actually setting it up properly. So they just changed the workflow for how you create that stuff just to make it easier, which makes sense. Serverless now actually supports your storage firewalls. So you've now got a choice. So you can now plug things in essentially by having a fixed subnet ID to allow you to actually associate that with your firewall. You've got a choice between doing that or having a private endpoint. So you've got another option for how you can connect securely from Databricks Serverless into your existing storage. Yeah, and it previously had a little bit more networking and a little bit more engineering going around the side. You've now got that extra option. As to which way people are going to go, yet to be seen. We don't dig into it yet because it's quite new, but interesting. A little bit of consistency around workspaces. So previously, some parts of Databricks, you could go /workspace and that knew where you were. Other parts, you wouldn't use the /workspace, and it was just a little bit inconsistent. And they just changed it so REST API, percentage run, the shell interface, all just now expects /workspace will just work. So just makes sense. That'll be a lot easier. Should be a lot good. Again, similar to the serverless bits, an update to the NSG rules. So if you are doing any networking around Databricks workspaces and other things, again, have a look. There's some changes around there. You want to make sure you are up to date with how that is actually properly working. Okay. Largely making it easier for you. Similar to the other things that we saw adding as delta sharing. So we saw volumes out of this delta sharing suddenly appear in the marketplace as something you can do in marketplace. We then saw AI models added to delta sharing. Lo and behold, we've now got AI models appearing in Databricks Marketplace. So previously, it was largely just essentially you can make a delta table and then sell that on the marketplace or provide it free on the marketplace. Now you can make a delta table, or you can make a volume of unstructured data and files, or you can do a machine learning or AI model, and you can publish all three of those on Databricks Marketplace. So it's just becoming a much wider thing of sharing things to do with data and AI, rather than just specifically tabular data. Getting better and better. And then finally, last thing we saw in January was native XML file support. Now this is actually a huge thing. Anyone who has a legacy system or an old system that they can't replace, they're still using like SOAP style API endpoints and is kicking out XML. I've had a nightmare of trying to use XML within Spark for a long time. We at Advancing Analytics, we've had to build around it using jar files, and so step into Scala to do a conversion to move it from XML into JSON, then using the native JSON support. It's just been a pain to work with XML for Spark for so long. And we've been going, yeah, but hopefully people will stop using XML, so we won't really have to care. And people refuse to. They keep using XML. So this is super, super useful. There's loads of use cases where this would have saved us so much time over the past couple of years, which we can actually go, oh, great. We can just actually switch over, use the XML format. That'll make life a lot easier, especially the fact that it's also supported by autoloader. So you're just getting big dumps of XML. You put that into your landing zone, use autoloader to bring it into your lake and shape it directly into a delta table. Ah, easy. An easy life. So much easier these days than it used to be. But I still just wish people had stopped using XML. But, you can't have everything. Fine. So, it's a lot of stuff. There is a huge amount of changes that have been happening over the past 2 months. A load of changes that have happened in February as well, including that new release time going GA. So there is a new long-term support runtime, which we'll cover in the next bundle of news. But yeah, mix of stuff. So one, big enhancements in terms of Delta sharing and therefore the Databricks marketplace. Lots of nice little UI things, and just in terms of making it a better developer experience, from automatically fixing things to being able to just color code things how you like it to be color coded, to the updates to the results table, the updates to the cell UI, just lots of things going in there to make it nice to work with, better networking, some better things available on the AI serving kind of stuff, just essentially a load of changes across a whole load of stuff. There we go. Been bubbling up for 2 months. I've got it all off my chest. There we go. So, whole load of things to look in for. I do suggest, as always, you have a skim through the release notes yourself. I'll pop a link to that down below. You can go and have a look and see which of the things that you really care about. And yeah, please stop using XML. All right. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you next time. Cheers.